Welcome, everyone. In this session, we have Shailvi Wakhlu, Senior Director of Data Science at Strava, presenting Workplace Self-Advocacy for Women in Data Science. Just a quick note that please post your questions to the Q&A box instead of the chat. Shailvi, a reminder to start your timer. Off to you.
Thanks so much, Jennifer. Hi, everyone. So excited that you're all here for this session today. So as Jennifer mentioned, my name is Shailvi Wakhlu. I go by the she, her pronouns, and I'm the Senior Director of Data at Strava. Strava, for those of you who are not familiar, is the leading social platform for athletes and the largest sports community in the world. We have over 99 million athletes in 195 countries. And if you sweat, you're an athlete, in which case I hope you'll consider checking out our platform. So to kick off our topic for today, I thought we'd start with the basics. What is self-advocacy? It is speaking up for oneself. It's a very simple concept, but it's very powerful for us to incorporate for our career success. Understanding, prioritizing, and communicating our needs is how we grow ourselves and also our careers. Simple concepts aren't always easy to practice, and self-advocacy is not a skill that comes naturally to most people. I'm one of those people to whom it doesn't come naturally. Many folks, I think, face a lot of difficulties figuring out how to shine the light on their achievements or how to even talk about themselves. And if that's something that sounds familiar, then you should feel comfortable in the fact that you're not alone. It is very common, and I think there are generally a lot of reasons for that. Cultural reasons, I think, are pretty common. Anything that remotely resembles boasting can be seen negatively in some cultures. And, I come from a culture where keeping a low profile is almost encouraged as a norm. Sometimes it's for safety reasons, sometimes it's for acceptance, and sometimes it's just the normal habit that people have built up. Gender is another reason. Women and marginalized genders are often given that direct or indirect feedback that they shouldn't be too loud, they shouldn't be too demanding, or subconsciously they should prioritize being liked over being regarded as competent. This bias is actually backed by data from multiple studies like the Big Five personality test, where women as an aggregate rank higher on the agreeableness quotient. Whether that's something that they do on their own or whether it's something they feel they have to do, that is not part of the study. Society, I think, in general, also creates these reasons that almost discourage self-promotion in some way. People who appear salesy or flashy, there's a lot of negative connotations attached to that. And our brains are almost sometimes programmed to ignore any messaging when people are praising themselves. It is usually considered more acceptable in society to have a third party praise someone. And that is how you see advertisements and things like that also show up. However, all of those reasons apart, I think for most of us, the biggest hurdle is sometimes our own inner voice. We struggle to reconcile our desire to be seen and heard and not be seen as bragging. And that is our inner voice saying something, not somebody explicitly giving us that reason. All of these reasons and more can make self-advocacy very hard. Some of these reasons are, I feel, even greater for women in data science in particular. And a big reason for that is there's not nearly enough of us in this profession. As of March 2021, women held only 18% of all data science positions in the US. The share of women in data science in lower income countries is actually even lower than that. This trend hasn't varied a whole lot in the last decade, but communities like this one are the reason that we hope that that ratio changes over time. When we don't see people that look like us in the professions that we work at, it is much harder for us to overcome that inner voice that's telling us not to stand out or telling us not to be considered difficult. The societal, cultural, and gendered messages that we have received all our life end up getting amplified. And without the right tools, it becomes that much harder for us to advocate for ourselves. So while it is hard, it is extremely important for us to learn the skills to advocate for ourselves properly. It is a key skill that we all need to practice, and it is something that helps us do the right thing by our careers. We have to be comfortable, confident, and genuine in advocating for ourselves. And why? The biggest reason is because it is almost self advocacy is very, very crucial when it comes to making more money and negotiating good salaries. People can only pay you what they think you're worth, and if you don't explain to them what you're worth, they can't figure that out by themselves. Promotions are another good reason. Promotions are often dependent on people clearly articulating to the people who are in charge of doling out promotions, that, like, how do I personally add value to the business? And people who are in positions to sponsor you need reminders of that. Also, for people who are in a leadership position or maybe even lead a small team or a project, your ability to get resources and headcount and buy-in from superiors or peers alike, all of those people need to comprehend the value of what it is that your team and you are doing, and how well you can convince someone that what you're working on is great, it's worth investing in. That's a way for you to get more resources, and that's helpful to the career path as well. Overall, success typically depends on your ability to make sure that people understand your value. In general, the world does not know how to measure quickly the capabilities that you have and what value that you add unless you articulate it to them. So, all in all, it really helps if you take that time to learn the skills and practice tips for self advocacy. So, self advocacy, there are other sort of specific ways why self advocacy is good for our careers, especially as women in data science. Our work requires us to collaborate very closely with business stakeholders. We can't do our jobs if we don't have good business context. And this is something I hear from a lot of data scientists, that they're not getting looped in, they're not getting into those discussions, they're not receiving context early enough. And if that doesn't happen, then how can you proactively figure out how to contribute to those spaces? So that is why, if you're more proactive in making sure your business stakeholders understand your value, you'll be in a better position to unlock even them and yourself in the goals that you're trying to achieve. Another good reason is a good data culture. Our jobs are dependent on having a good data culture in the companies and the teams that we choose to work at. And most of the times, our teammates are looking at the data scientists to set that tone, to be that advocate for good, clean data practices. It helps us at our jobs. It also makes us more likely to achieve our goals. And in the end, it's again something that helps the company, because good data is a requirement for good decisions. So you advocating for your own skills, for your own functional expertise, is a good thing for the company in general. Also, self advocacy as a data scientist means prioritizing removing bias in data. I definitely wanted to point this out because this is becoming increasingly relevant as something data scientists should do proactively and not as a reaction. Because there is a lot of potential for harm for very large populations if we don't do it proactively. If we don't convince our teams and companies to prioritize this, ultimately it will still be us who are held accountable when things don't go as planned. So, in all of these cases, when we speak to our needs, we are speaking up for our careers. We are speaking up for our skills. We are ensuring that we are receiving the trust and respect of those around us, and ensuring that our ability to make impact is not hampered in any way. So, with all of that in mind, how do we get better at self advocacy? I have three simple things to walk everybody through. First, we need to reframe our own internal mental narrative, and that's something I'll walk through a couple of examples. After that, we'll learn to reframe the external narrative, and finally, we will practice. That's where my hashtag humble brag challenge comes in. So let's examine some of our mental narratives that hinder self advocacy. The first example, I think it's one of the most common ones that I hear, is that I'm too busy for self advocacy, especially for people who've been in either they're going through career transition or they're senior career professionals. There's barely enough hours in the day. However, I want to anchor this one to the fact that investing in your own growth is very important, because that is something that puts your practices in place, puts you in that habit of doing it early, almost doing it as a second muscle, where you don't feel that you have to do something extra, but it almost becomes a norm. So the sooner you invest in that growth, the easier it would be for you to get dividends from that concept later on when you need it. Another example is the feeling that my talent should speak for itself. So this is something that at least I heard all my early career, that hey, just do good work, focus on the work, you'll be rewarded for it, and just shine brightly and the world will notice. But to stretch that analogy, what if nobody's in the same room when you're shining your light? How does that pan out? So at the end of the day, I think people cannot acknowledge what they don't see. We assume that our talents will shine and our leaders will know we are great, but maybe they're too busy, or maybe they don't understand the nuances of the tiny things that you are doing, which add up to the big thing that you're doing. So if your value is not understood, or if it is not seen, how will it be possible for you to achieve what you're trying to setting out to achieve? The other example is, this is, I think, especially true for technical people, that we're almost taught that our work is to code and not to talk about it. It's almost seen as a bad thing if it comes across that you're good at talking. Hopefully that's changing over the years, but I definitely remember that feeling when I started my career. I'm a very chatty person. I grew up on the debate stage, and it felt very hard to reconcile my two identities, which is how I thought of it. And over time, I realized that those two identities were just two identities. They weren't necessarily in conflict. If you look at the metrics of success of any job, there is going to be some aspect which is critical communication skills. And I think every job has that. If you don't share learnings, if you don't get feedback on what you're doing, how will you move forward? How will you achieve bigger things? If you don't explain why certain solutions will and won't work, people may not trust you. They may not understand that you're really trying hard to do the best for them. So, everybody who works with you needs to understand the depth to which you have thought about the problem and are confident that you're coming up with the right solutions. Then you can take the time to explain why you're competent in coming up with the successful solution, and they will also be on board. I also think that people generally tend to feel that this is just something that takes too much time. That I'm an engineer, I'm not a salesperson. Like, don't ask me to, don't hire someone else who can talk me up. But I think overwhelmingly, whatever your career interests are, whether you're in corporate, whether you're in academics, whether you're an entrepreneur and you want to convince people to buy into what you're pitching to them, all of it requires explanations. Even PhDs, people who in academics, they have to spend time doing their defending their thesis and talking about it, seeking out industry partners who can add to it. And if they don't do it, any hired person who does not have that context is never going to be able to match that same passion and that same vision about what they're doing. So if you don't want to lose out on all these innovations that come about because people take the time to articulate what they're doing great, then we'd be missing out on something that's super important. And my final example for the mental narrative is just, that mindset that, like, it's unnecessary, it's flashy, we don't need it. And to that, I say that celebrating is something that you don't just do for yourself, you do it for your whole team. You do it because it is something that uplifts morale. It's something that other people can look at it as an example of what worked, what didn't work, what hurdles you encountered. And it is that opportunity to really thank the universe for that opportunity to produce value and for expressing gratitude for the successful outcomes that come out of it. So, with that, let's pivot to the external narrative. Once we feel comfortable in our own minds, and I'd love to hear later if people have other things that are internal hurdles, but once we feel comfortable in our own mind, the next step is to just improve on the messaging. And it is a trainable skill, we can all learn it. So, I'm going to talk about an example of a project that was just finished, which went well. So, there's a few different ways you could talk about it. One extreme is that you could just downplay it. You could say project was no big deal, anybody could have finished it in a couple of days. You could go the other extreme. You could brag about it. You could say, I did the best job on this project. Nobody else could have finished it so quickly. And you know what? If that's your jam, I will not judge. It's okay to overcorrect on the other side if that's what it takes. But I think, a little bit of the middle path is the humble brag version, which is the team came together to land an incredibly challenging project, which also became a fun way to expand our skills. We pushed hard and we were able to meet it in half the time it was expected to take. So notice the keywords here. You are acknowledging that something was challenging and that you worked hard on it, and that showcases your ability to accept and shine on tough problems. Highlighting that you're capable of bringing together a team to collaborate and share credit shows leadership qualities. By including a measurable achievement, you are providing a tangible win that people can focus on. Showing what you learned, that you learned something, you grew from it, you had fun, all of it sort of brings it all together to confirm that, this project was a natural fit for you and you should be given more such projects in the future. So coming up with the right words is helpful, but you don't need to overthink it. I list this out as an example. It's not an exact formula. You have to find something authentic that sits well with you. But I think if you really think about what the success was, why you feel good about it, I think the words will come to you. So don't try to fit it into a template of sorts, but just be genuine and just share why you truly care about something. And I think that can produce some very good results in terms of the messaging. And yeah, finally we come to the last section, which is just the hashtag humble brag challenge. I think anything you want to do well, you should take that time to practice it, and so that it comes naturally. So I have two simple challenges. One is just a personal challenge. So start intentionally documenting your wins. It can just be anything that you are proud of. It doesn't even have to be a very big win. Yes, I wrote big win there, but small wins count. Anything that you think is representative of what you feel proud about. And this is just a personal thing. So write it for yourself so that you get comfortable identifying what those wins are. Be very specific. It would be much easier for you if you come back to it a month later to understand exactly what it was that you were referring to. And if you build that habit of doing it once a week at regular cadence, it becomes much easier to sort of like just make that habit and keep it top of mind. And then the final piece is like share it as your for your next promotion. I don't mean share the exact document, but go through that list when you're ready to advocate for your own promotion. Go through that list. It'll give you some themes of what you do well, what you know you're improving on, and it'll be much easier to make that case when you have that bucketed out in themes, because you would have written it down frequently and have built a mental narrative for yourself around it. The next step, if you are comfortable, is go public. So here I think it always helps to have a group of people who are in it with you. Maybe it's your set of teammates, maybe it's a private Slack channel, or you have a community that you feel comfortable with. But get into that habit of actually writing out your humble brags for external consumption, for somebody outside, beyond you, and get other people involved. It can be a super fun thing that everybody, like one of my teams, we used to do it as just like gratitude Fridays, and it was kind of fun. But we used to talk about like wins of the week, and it became something like it was just a norm that people did. Sometimes they veer off into something that doesn't feel authentic, and everybody has their own thing to try out. But share those learnings, like really frame it as, I'm sharing learnings, everybody can learn from this, and everybody can know when the time comes that they can connect with me on it. Cadence I recommend is once a month. Of course, you can do it more often as you prefer. And with that, I want to thank you all for listening. I hope this was useful. Feel free to follow me on social media if you'd like to stay in touch, especially on Twitter. If you follow me, I follow back, and my DMs are open. Also, I'm releasing a book later this year on self-advocacy, and if you have any feedback on what you would like those subtopics to be that are most relevant to you, very welcome. And big thank you to the Women in Data Science team for hosting me and organizing such a wonderful event. This is my second year participating, and I feel very happy to be a part of this community. With that, that's the close of my session. Please don't forget to join the closing ceremonies at 5 p.m. And in the meantime, as Jennifer mentioned earlier, Q&A is open for chat or also any stories that you'd like to share. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Shailvi. This was amazing. Those first points really nailed me. Probably true for a lot of us, I think. We don't have any questions in the Q&A yet, but also share stories. I think that would be cool too, because I think this is something that happens with women, especially that we're always so busy and we got to get things done and we don't need to do that. That's unnecessary. All those things like really resonated with me. So yeah, I guess like I love the ideas about, marking it on your calendar, do it on a Friday. That's probably a good day. They tend to be slow. And I would probably be like, I'll just do that later. But I guess having the discipline to advocate for yourself is really important. So these were really, really good lessons. I appreciate all of it. Really great session.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, no, totally. I feel like so many times in my career, I realized too late that I should have made the time earlier for, just getting into that habit of self-advocacy. And then I just felt bad. I'm like, oh, I could have been
Yeah.
doing
All
something
the things that
cooler.
you missed. Yeah. I've had that like so many times. I'm like, oh, I should do that. Oh, I should do that. I should do that. And then I'm like, whatever, never go move on to the next thing.
Yep.
So, but this was a really good presentation to help drive home for us how much we need to do it. And it's not just important for us and ourselves, it's important for all women in this field. So if you're having problems thinking about it for yourself, think about it that way, and maybe that will help too.
Oh,
And
absolutely. Absolutely.
yeah, I had like, this isn't me. I heard this somewhere, like, and I try to do this with myself, even though I still fails, like try to think of it as like look at yourself as your friend, not as yourself. And
Yes.
then what would you do for your friend? Okay, then it starts to make more sense. So
Yeah, I always tell people, like, when it comes time for performance reviews and people are filling out their self-evaluation, I'm like, how would your best friend or your sister talk about you? Like, don't underplay it. Like, use their words, because they would probably hype you up. And if you channel their words, maybe it makes it easier.
absolutely. That's really good advice. I think that makes sense. So I see lots of people are just very much chiming in the chat. So, but still no questions.
No worries.
But this has been really amazing. But thank you for the great presentation, Shailvi. This concludes our session. If you have additional questions for our speaker, I put her Twitter and her she has a website there, and looking forward to the book coming out. That will probably be full of lots of goodness too. So thank you all for being here. Thank you for the session, Shailvi, and we'll see you at the closing ceremonies, everyone.
Thank you.